Okay, well, let's get started. I guess welcome everybody. So just to give a bit of context for people who don't know, my name's Grace. I'm the Senior Policy Officer here at the Traveller Movement, and we're basically running Operation Traveller Vote at the moment, trying to get people registered to vote, voter ID stuff, and kind of getting people more kind of politically aware, in Romani, Gypsy, Roma and Irish Traveller communities. A bit about the Traveller Movement. We're a registered charity and we work to kind of promote the rights and promote inclusion of Romani, Gypsy, Roma and Irish travellers. I'm going to let the panel introduce themselves. So I'm going to start with Stephen, if you want to introduce yourself.
Sure, thanks, Grace. Hi, everyone. My name's Stephen. I work at the Electoral Commission. I'll tell you a bit more about who we are in a minute. But I work, well, maybe I should mention it now. So we are the independent body that oversees elections in the UK, as you might assume. And a big part of that work involves giving voters the knowledge and confidence they need in order to take part in elections. So that's why we're here today. And we do a lot of work with partners like the Traveller Movement to help reach different groups. So we're really grateful for the opportunity. My particular role focuses on those relationships with partners and supporting voters through them. So that's why you've got me today.
Great, thanks, Stephen. Olivia, do you want to go next?
Yes, thanks, Grace. Hi, I'm Olivia Hammond. I am the community advocacy caseworker here at the Traveller Movement. So I work with community members day in and day out on a range of different issues that they might be facing. And I'm also a Romani Gypsy too, so hopefully can offer some insight from that perspective as well.
Charlie, if you want to introduce yourself now.
Hi everyone, my name is Charlie Doherty. I'm an Irish Traveller. I'm the Youth Engagement and Development Officer for the Traveller Movement, and I'm heavily involved in Operation Traveller Vote.
Great. So I'm going to start sharing my screen now, Stephen. So just give me 2 seconds. And if you just want to let me know when you want to change the...
Sure, will do.
Yes.
Great.
Perfect.
So we're here today to talk about the UK Parliament general election on the 4th of July, and what over the next sort of little while I'll try and do is hopefully walk through the process for you so that you understand what you need to do so that you can have your say on the 4th of July and who will represent you and people in your area in Parliament. So if we can move on to the next slide, I just want to take a moment. This is maybe, if we go to the next slide, was going to ask if there's anything in particular that you want me to kind of make sure I cover today. But I think given the format, what we'll do is we'll maybe just skip past that and we can come back to anything that I've missed as questions at the end. So if we can move on, Grace.
Yeah, sorry, I just wanted to say for anyone who's kind of waiting in the background, if you have any questions, just pop them in the Q&A box and then I'll kind of keep an eye on that all throughout and we can kind of answer questions as we go.
Yeah. Great. But I mean, you can feel free to pop comments, questions in the chat now and we can pick those up as we go. So just to give you an overview of what I'm going to talk about, I'm going to talk about who we are and what we do. I've touched on it. I'll say a bit more. We'll talk about what a general election actually is, because we understand that's not everyone will fully understand what a general election is. And we'll talk about what an MP actually is and what they do. I'll talk about how to register to vote. You can't vote on the 4th of July if you're not first registered. So we'll talk about how you do that and what the benefits are of doing so. And then lastly, we'll talk about the different ways that you can vote in the election, and that includes voting in person. And so we'll talk a bit about what to expect at the polling station, because that process has changed recently. So if we could have the next slide, please, Grace. Thank you. So who are we? So we do a lot of different things. I've mentioned some of this already. So we regulate political finance, which is a bit of a fancy way of saying that we publish data on the donations and loans that are made to political parties in the UK. We publish them on our website. And we also publish what they've spent on their campaigns after an election. And that's all to give you guys, all of us, in fact, as voters, the confidence that we know where the money is coming from that's being spent to try and convince us to vote for whatever candidate or party. So that's one of the things we do. You can get all that information on the website if that's what you're looking for. We also register political parties. Oh, sorry. And And so, yeah, if you want to create a political party and stand candidates in elections, you need to register with us first. We do a lot of work to make sure that elections and referendums are free, fair, and well run. We don't actually deliver the elections ourselves, they're delivered by local councils. So we have a big role to play, though, in supporting them to make sure they deliver the elections in line with the law. And lastly, the reason we're here today, we do a lot of work to provide information to voters ahead of elections so they feel confident enough to vote. And hopefully by the end of today, you will feel more confident if you're not currently. If not, I've not done my job. All right, next slide, please. So what is a general election? Let's start from brass tacks. So if we go to the next slide, we've got a short video that will hopefully explain all. Now there is sound, but hopefully you can all see the captions. It's okay. Okay, so hopefully that was fairly clear, and it's worth just taking a second to just pause on that. So you may well be aware and have heard of discussion of councillors and councils. So those are also people that we vote for. They make decisions more at the local level. So they have certain powers to make decisions relating to things like some power over schools, some power over roads. Bin collections is a classic example of something that your local council deals with. But the election on the 4th of July is purely about who represents your local area in the UK Parliament. And as the video said, when they're there, they are debating issues, they are changing laws. Basically, they are there to scrutinise the government. That means they're there to check and challenge the work the government are doing and try and keep them, make sure that they are being challenged on what they're doing. And even though you're only voting for your MP, for the person to represent you in Parliament, the party that then has the most MPs in Parliament gets to form the government. So in a way, you are helping to decide who gets to form the government and run the country. So that's who you're voting for on the 4th of July. Next slide, please. Oh, I think that's just started again. Yeah, there we go. So I think I've just covered most of that. It is worth just pointing out that despite the way that sometimes dare I say, candidates will talk in the news, despite the way that some adverts will phrase things, we're not actually voting for the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister is the leader of the party that ends up with the most MPs after the election. So at the moment, if the Conservatives get back in, that would be Rishi Sunak. If Labour get in, that would be Keir Starmer, etc. So we're not choosing the Prime Minister directly. Oh, sorry, just one quick thing to point out there. So you need to be 18 to vote in the general election on the 4th of July. You can actually register from the age of 16, but you need to be 18 on the 4th of July or before in order to cast your vote. And you can find out information about who's standing, who wants to be, who wants you to vote for them to be your MP by entering your postcode at our website, and the address is there. Thanks, Grace. So how do you register to vote? Well, you can't attend the party if you don't buy a ticket, kind of thing. Okay, you've got to register to vote first. And how do you do that? Well, if we move on. So you can register online. It's very quick and easy. It takes a matter of minutes. The address is there. Now, you've got to do that by 11:59 p.m. on Tuesday, this coming Tuesday. So there's not a lot of time left. Doesn't take long, so don't worry about that. But there isn't much time left, so don't leave it to the last minute. All you need is your national insurance number, your name and address. Now we've got a few things to talk about in a minute. If you don't have your national insurance number or you can't find it, mean, I've got mine committed to memory. I don't know why, it wasn't intentional. But if you don't, like most normal people, there are other ways you can prove your identity, and the council will tell you what, or the website will tell you, actually no, the council will get in touch with you to tell you what you need to give them instead. But you only need to register if you've never been registered before, if you've changed your name, for instance, after getting married, or you've moved house or moved, you know, where you're kind of based. Otherwise, you don't need to register again. You'll be on the register and you can check online. Right, next slide, please. So who can register to vote in the general election? Well, you can register, as I said before, as long as you're 16 and over, and you need to be either a UK or Irish citizen or a qualifying Commonwealth citizen. Now, what the qualifying bit, so the Commonwealth bit first, that's any of the countries that are part of the Commonwealth, and we've got a full list on our website if you're not sure. The qualifying part simply means that you need to have leave to remain in the UK or leave to enter, or you just don't need such leave because of, you know, your citizenship, maybe dual citizenship, for example. I'll say it again, just to be clear, even though you can register at 16, you can only vote from the age of 18 or older on the 4th of July. And again, there's more information at that on our website. Next slide, please. So I did say when you register that you need to give your name and address. Now, we understand, you know, for some Gypsy, Roma and Traveller people, you may not live at a fixed address, or certainly not necessarily a sort of long-term one. And if that's the case, that's not a problem. You simply fill in a different form, and it's not catchy, so bear with me, the electoral registration form for someone with no fixed or permanent address. And all you do on that form is you give details of where you spend most of your time. That's it, there you go. And if you're not sure, just contact your council. They will be able to advise you how and where to register, that kind of thing. So let's say that you know, everyone on this call is either registered or they're going to register by Tuesday. What to expect when you're actually voting? So let's move on to the next slide. So the first thing to talk about is the voter ID law, I feel like, that you may have heard of. This was brought in a couple of years ago, and what it means is that you now need to show photo ID when voting in person at a polling station in some elections, including the UK Parliament general election on the 4th of July. Now, it's written in law which forms of ID you can use. It's not any form of ID with a photo on it. The list is in the law, and we've got it on our website. But it includes things that a lot of people will have anyway, passport or driver's license. But it also has other things like older person's bus pass and the disabled person's bus pass, blue badge, biometric immigration documents can be used, national identity cards can be used if you've been issued one from a country in the European Economic Area, the EEA. Again, all of that's listed on our website, including what those countries are, so don't worry about that. But if you don't have, or you can't find any of those forms of ID by the 4th of July, don't worry. You can apply to your elections team in your area for what's known as a voter authority certificate. That's basically free voter ID. Now, the deadline to apply for that is 5 p.m. on Wednesday, the 26th of June. So you've still got about a week and a half to do it. But again, like I said with registration, please don't leave it till the last minute. If you need that free voter ID in order to be able to vote at a polling station, apply for it now, because there will be a rush as the deadline gets closer. Next slide. So I think this is another video. It's going to talk to you a bit about those accepted forms of ID.
Let's see if I unmute myself, will you be able to actually hear it?
It may be that when you share the slides you share with Found.
Lots of different types of photo ID are accepted when voting in person in a polling station in England. These include a passport, a driving licence, including provisional licence, a blue badge, travel passes, which are funded by the UK government, including an older person's bus pass, a disabled person's bus pass, and an Oyster 60+ card. A freedom pass, identity card with passmark, a biometric immigration document, defence identity card, and some national identity cards. Please visit the Electoral Commission website to see the full list of acceptable photo ID. You only need to show one form of photo ID, but it needs to be the original version and not a photocopy. It must be a hard copy, not a digital version like you might find in an app. The name on your photo ID should match the name you registered to vote with. Your photo ID does not need to include a gender marker, and it doesn't matter if it's out of date or expired, as long as it still looks like you. For more information, including which elections require photo ID and the full list of accepted forms of ID, visit electoralcommission.org.uk/voter ID.
Oh, okay. So those are the forms of ID that you can take to vote at the polling station. Once you get to the polling station, what to expect? Well, as always, the polling stations are open from 7 AM in the morning until 10 o'clock at night. So it's a really, long period of time. You can choose, when works for you in the day. And in fact, even if you get to your polling station late in the day and there's a queue outside, so long as you're in the queue at 10 o'clock at night, you will be let in and allowed to vote. So that is worth remembering. Don't panic if you get there at 10 to 10 and there's a queue. Now, when you get into the polling station, you'll go to the desk, and anyone that's voted before this part of the process hasn't changed. When you get to the desk, you will be asked for your name and address, and they will check that you're on the electoral register. That part is the same as always. They will then ask, however, to see your ID. And they will take the ID and they will look at you, and all they're looking for on that ID is to check that you look the same. They can tell from your ID that you are the person shown on the ID. They're not checking any of your other information. That's the only reason they're looking at it. They'll give you your ID back. They'll give you your ballot paper, and you can take it to a polling booth to cast your vote as normal. A couple of things to say about that process of checking the ID, though. If you would rather have your ID checked in private, you have the right to ask for that, and they will grant that request. They will grant that request without question. You shouldn't have to give a reason, and they shouldn't ask you for one. It's just your preference. That private space may be a separate room in the polling station, or it may be behind a privacy screen. It will just depend where the polling station is, what facilities they have, and that kind of thing. You can also, if you wish, if you'd prefer, ask for a female member of staff to check your ID, not a male. And if that's possible, then the polling station staff will grant that request. Obviously, if they don't have any female members of staff, they'll struggle, but they will do their best. It's also worth noting, actually, that there will be a mirror in that private space, so that if you wear a face veil for religious reasons, for instance, or any other reason, you can remove it. They'll check your ID, and then you'll be able to replace it properly in front of a mirror afterwards. But the last thing just to say is that if you have any questions at all on the day in the polling station, the staff are there to help, and they will do their very best to help you, including if you even need it. They can help you actually cast your vote if you need help reading or interpreting the ballot paper, for example. You can ask, and the presiding officer who's responsible for the polling station, they can help you to cast your vote if you need that support. Next slide. So voting by post. If you don't want to vote in person, or for whatever reason, really, you can instead vote by post. Now, the deadline to apply for that postal vote is 5 PM on Wednesday the 19th. So that's 6 days away now, Wednesday the 19th at 5 PM. So there's not much time. So you apply online, or indeed you can apply by post, or you can go into your local council and do it there. They will then send you your ballot paper that you fill in and you post it back. When you apply, you'll be asked for your date of birth and your signature. And actually, you'll be asked for your national insurance number as well. So like I said before, when you're registering, if you don't have that national insurance number, don't worry. The council will tell you what else you can give them to sort of prove who you are. Then hopefully a few days later, but there might be a slight delay because it'll be very busy, you'll get your postal vote pack in the post, as I said. You fill that in according to the instructions that you're given, and then you send it back to your local elections team. Now, it's worth adding that you should be able, if you need help to complete that application, do ask your council, and they'll be able to help you, talk you through how to do it. But the key thing, once you've got your postal vote ballot pack and you've marked your X in the box for who you want to vote for your MP, that needs to get back to your elections team by 10 o'clock on the 4th of July. So, don't put it in the post on that Thursday morning. Post it a good few days in advance if you can. If actually, though, it comes quite late or you don't get around to it, you can actually hand deliver that postal ballot pack to your polling station on polling day, or to an office at your council. You just have to ask them, they'll tell you which one to hand it into. Next slide. So the third and final way of voting is known as voting by proxy. And this is basically where you nominate someone you trust to vote on your behalf. They will go to your polling station and they will cast your vote for you. You need to apply for that by 5 p.m. on Wednesday, the 26th of June. So that's a little over a week before polling day. So it's later than the postal vote deadline if you want to do that. You tell the trusted person who you want them to vote for on your behalf. They need to go to your polling station. Now, when they do that, they don't need to take your ID. They need to take theirs, because what they're doing is they're proving to the polling station staff that they're the person you have written on the form that you want to vote for you. And then they then fill in the ballot paper for you and put it in the ballot box as normal, and they'll get a separate ballot paper for themselves. Now, let's say that you have someone you trust you want to vote for you, but they don't live in the area you live in. They're not in your constituency. That's what it's called, the area you live in for the purposes of an election. They can do what's called a postal proxy vote, which is where they cast your vote for you by post instead. But you can apply for that when you apply for the proxy vote online. So it's just about where the person is living. Right. So there's lots of ways you can get resources and support to help you understand all this stuff, or indeed just simply to go through the process. Best port of call for a lot of stuff will be to speak to the elections team at your local council, or indeed your electoral registration officer if you live in Scotland. And very helpfully, you can get their contact information, including a phone number and an email address, by entering your postcode into our website. But you can also get more information on a lot of this stuff on our website, as I've talked about, including our quick guide to voting videos. So the video you saw before about the accepted forms of ID, that's one of a series of 9 very short videos, all that talk through everything I've talked about today. And you might find those are quite quite helpful videos to watch. They're on our YouTube channel in a playlist broken down by nation. So if you're in Scotland, there's a playlist for you in Scotland. If you're in Wales, there's one for you in Wales. If you're in England, there's one for you in England. There is not one, I should add, for people in Northern Ireland, because voter ID has been a requirement there for about 20 years. So people there don't need the kind of support that people in the rest of the UK do, for whom this is very new. And then you can also call us as well. The number was there. So resources that we published that you can use to help raise awareness, encourage people to vote, to register to vote, I should say, and to help them meet the voter ID requirement are all available on our website. So you may have seen our voter registration campaign. You see some examples of it here. So across this campaign, we have a diverse range of people celebrating the fact that they are registered to vote in sort of weird and wonderful ways. And the photographs, those scenes, you can see across a range of resources, including posters, social media graphics, and other things. And I'll just highlight the chap on the top right there. He's a Romani Gypsy. So we took those photographs of him with support from friends, families, and travellers. And so there's a set of resources amongst those that feature him. So if you wanted to, it just hopefully shows that, we wanted basically to represent a range of different groups we know are either under-registered, less likely to be registered to vote, or who face other barriers to voting. And we know that Gypsy, Roma and Traveller communities certainly do face those barriers. So we were very keen to include them, and that's why they're in there. Next slide, please. So similarly, we've got resources on the voter ID requirement that your staff might find useful, or indeed that you as voters might find useful too. So those include a booklet for voters. So that's got a lot of the kind of information I talked about today, and a guide for staff, which, as the name suggests, is more aimed at people supporting voters to take part. Both of those are available to either view online, or you can print them out. Again, we also have posters, social media graphics, and other materials, and you can see some examples of those on the screen. So I'll stop there. I've dumped a lot of information on you. I hope it was all clear, but if not, please do ask questions, either about things I've said that weren't clear, or certainly about things that I've maybe not covered that you'd like to know about.
Perfect. That was great, Stephen. I'm gonna see if anyone has any questions at the minute. We're just gonna wait a couple of minutes while people kind of type there. And if you have any questions about any of that content, about how you register to vote, about what you need to register to vote, just pop them in the Q&A box there. And then kind of the next step is sort of talking a little bit about some questions that I have prepared about why it's important to vote and why it's important to have your voice heard. And that's why we have some of our kind of community members, staff members here. Sorry, I'm in the main office and somebody's on the phone, so that's what you can hear in the background. Welcome to the Traveller Movement. Yes, so while people are typing away, I guess I'm going to ask kind of Charlie. I know that you haven't been registered to vote so far, so I'm wondering what kind of inspired you to register this year.
Yeah, so I've never voted before in my life. I'm 21 years old. And voting is not it's not too popular with travellers and gypsies. There's a kind of attitude of, we're doing our thing and they're doing their thing. So long as they stay over there, we stay over here, we'll be fine. But I suppose when it first occurred to me that it was in my best interest and the best interest of my people to vote is when I first decided, okay, well, I'm going to register to vote and I'm going to vote. I'm going to try and get everyone else to register to vote and vote, like in my, personal circle. And this is kind of what we're doing with the messaging with Operation Travel Vote, is trying to show how it works or how it's in your best interest to vote. For instance, a lot of travellers, a lot of them don't understand how voting can affect their homes, for instance. So we were over in Wales yesterday, doing a bit of a voter registration drive. And there was a man there, I'm not going to say his name, but there's a man there and he owned a piece of land. And he spent years trying to get it passed for planning permission, which is very common for travellers. They'll buy a piece of land, and the councillors will refuse to pass it a lot of times simply just on the fact that they're a gypsy or a traveller. The town will come out and say, well, we don't want them here. The councillor will say, well, I'm not going to pass the land then, which is also a very similar reason for why a lot of sites don't get developed. So I was trying to make the argument to him that, if himself and all his family and all the travellers and gypsies in the area were voting, then they'd be able to get someone, they'd be able to vote in a councillor who were more sympathetic to travellers and gypsies. And he kind of, I think he was a bit puzzled at first, and he was saying, well, surely they should care now. And I said, well, really, politicians care about votes. If you can keep them in, or if you can get rid of them, then they'll listen to what you have to say. So this is why this was part of the reason, but also just wider public perception as well. A lot of politicians, they'll run off the promise that they'll keep the town traveller free, or they'll keep the gypsy free. And this changes public perception because they come out and they say, tell these horror stories, and they diagnose a problem to which they're the only cure, which is quite convenient. So the argument was that if travellers and gypsies could come together politically, one, to vote and to have influence over local councillors in the area, but also nationally, and have more of a voice. So when people say things in the public square, they can push back against it. They'll have travellers and gypsies that represent them that'll be able to push back against it and be able to expose things that are lies and that are not true, which will then, in turn, change public perception. But again, part of how I was showing it was relevant to his life was, I was saying, a lot of travellers do construction, for instance, a lot of travelling do construction. And how do you find workers? They'll go around and knock on doors and they'll ask, like, do you need this done? And I was saying, well, if you go to a town where they don't like travellers and gypsies very much because they've all been coming out talking about it, and they're hearing these horror stories, they're not going to give you work. And if you go into a pub where the owner doesn't like travellers and gypsies, it's likely to kick you out. If you go into a restaurant where they think you're going to cause trouble, they want you to pay first. So all these things are based on perception, and a lot of it is based on people manipulating fear of gypsies and travellers. So voting and showing political unity will give you the opportunity to push back against that messaging and that image, and to change our image, and also, in terms of actually voting itself, to actually make difference in the areas you live in.
Great, Olivia, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, absolutely. I probably had a little bit of a different experience than Charlie. I registered to vote just as I turned 18. And the reason for that, though, and I often use this as a little bit of a tactic to encourage people to to register to vote is simply because I was trying to build my credit score. And it's pretty well known that if you register to vote, it will help you to build your credit score. And at the time, that was kind of all I was really bothered about. I just wanted to work on my credit score, and that's why I registered to vote. And I was getting quite a lot of questions about why I'd registered to vote, people sort of making fun at it, because as Charlie mentioned, it isn't a very common thing that gypsies and travellers would vote. And so I started doing some research around it, and that's when I started to get my first become interested in politics, really. And I think now my answer to why I vote would be mainly saying, hi, I exist, I'm a Romani gypsy and I exist and I have a voice and here's what I think. And as Charlie said, it's very, very valuable to use those voices because it's very important for political parties to get those votes. So if there's a group of us all voting, then our voice becomes more valuable as a unit. Another thing I would say is that, especially within my family, people would often say, "Oh, nothing ever changes. All the MPs are the same. You know, whatever prime minister we get in, they're all going to be the same. They don't like us. Nothing ever really changes." But I would argue against that and say that things are changing all the time, and we can clearly see that. And just to look into how it all works a little bit more, you know, there's lots of books out there, podcasts, YouTube videos that just explains how politics work in this country and how we bring in new laws and change policies. And you may think that it doesn't affect you, but it absolutely does. From the cost of the cost of local produce, from sites being readily available, it all impacts us. And again, I think it's difficult to complain about these things if we're not actively voting and trying to change them. So that would be the reason that I vote as a Romani gypsy, and how I try to encourage other people to vote, just by asking them about, you know, what problems they're facing and then looking at how policy might change to accommodate that. So yeah, so that's what I would add.
Great, Stephen. If you could kind of talk about maybe some common myths that you hear about voting and about the electoral process, and like how would you answer to them? So, for example, you know, people talk about that it never changes anything, all of those kind of things. What do you think are kind of the biggest myths, and how would you respond to them?
Sure. Yes, I mean, there are a lot of people who feel like, as they say, that their vote doesn't matter and that things don't really change. I think all I can say to that is that change often can happen quite slowly in politics, and so I think a big part of it is about being patient, as difficult as that can be. But you know, within that, you know, conversations, experiences will happen, and it is just sort of sticking at it and having the patience. And I think, you know, Charlie and the others have very helpfully, you know, covered a lot of the sort of reasons why you might choose to vote. And I think it is worth just pausing on that idea that, excuse me, your MP represents your local area. They are therefore, particularly if you register to vote and you're voting, they are accountable to you. You know, they will almost certainly live in the area. They will have surgeries where you can go in. I never understand why they call them that, because it makes you think you're going to the doctors. But there are, you know, sessions where they're in the local area, often on a Friday, where you can go in and you can talk to them about the problem you're having and what are they going to do about it. So they are answerable to you. And if you're registered to vote, if you're voting, then that just gives you all the more kind of clout with them, if that makes sense. So it's I think having that access to people who can really make a difference is very powerful. And it's then just sort of sticking with it and having patience and understanding that sometimes change happens. It often happens slowly. It often happens in the background. It's not necessarily going to get headlines always, but change can happen, and will happen. And you know, we see that all the time. But it's about that accountability, I think.
Yeah, and I can see in the chat box, Amy has said we have 3 sites in York. Is there a way to check who is already registered so we can target those who are not, given there is so little time?
Yeah, I saw that. So yeah, basically the best thing to do is just contact your electoral services team and they'll be able to tell you. So as I've said before, but I'll say it again, you can get their contact information just by entering your postcodes onto our website. And I'm just going to post the link. Hopefully you've seen that there in the chat.
Perfect. Yes, we are also on that bandwagon trying to get people registered to it, so we understand the pressure. And then I have another question, sort of for Stephen. Sorry, I'm picking on you now.
That's all right.
But it
That's what I'm here for.
says, but we work with European Roma quite a lot. So I guess the question is, what barriers would European Roma have in registering? And do you need settled status to vote? And how do you know that people have settled status? And when you're going out kind of registering, what's the criteria behind that? And do you often find that kind of European migrants now are disenfranchised?
Yes, I think, there's certainly a range of groups where their immigration status or their citizenship, for instance, is kind of slightly less than straightforward. That can cause an issue. So the first thing to say is just to go back to the eligibility to register to vote. So if you have British citizen or Irish citizenship, you're fine. If you have the citizenship from a Commonwealth country and you have leave to remain or leave to enter, then you're eligible to register to vote. So it's just a question of working out whether you have that or not. And I confess I'm not sure how you check your immigration status. So if that's something that we can find out for you and we can maybe share it afterwards, I'm happy to check that for you. I think, as we touched on, I know that for a lot of, for some members of the community, it's simply that issue of where to register. And as I said earlier on, it can be anywhere where you sort of spend a meaningful amount of time. So it doesn't, you don't need to be in a permanent house over many, many years. It can just be a place where you spend significant amounts of time. And if you've got any questions, again, just speak to your council and they'll be able to advise you. And that's what they're there for.
Perfect, thank you. And then I think kind of another one would be about assistance if you have kind of mobility issues, if you have a disability. Are there a way to get assistance in the polling station? And I know some people will have like literacy issues. So is there a place to go where you can get somebody else to register you to vote without you having to go online, especially like if people have digital literacy issues?
Yes, so there is lots of support available. So in terms of, if we go through the process in order, so in terms of registering to vote, for example, if you speak to your council, they will be able to help. They'll be able to tell you how they can support you with that, and that I believe will often include, if you want to go into the office and someone can potentially sit with you and help you do that. If you're not online, there is a form you can download. So if someone can download it for you, print it out, you can fill it in by hand if you prefer. So that option's available too. So in person, postal form, and then online are your main options. When you come, if you want to apply for the free voter ID that I mentioned, there's support you can get there too. So you can download the form to apply for the free voter ID in either easy read or large print if you need that format rather than kind of the regular form. And it will, when you receive your voter ID, your voter authority certificate, you get sent instructions on how to use it. You can also request those instructions in not just large print and easy read, but also Braille. So if you have any of those needs, you can get the instructions in those formats too. And again, like registration, if you speak to your council, they may be able to help you complete that application. And even if you need help taking the photograph for that application, they may even be able to help you take the photograph in their offices. But again, just speak to them and they'll tell you what they can do to help. So that's the sort of process in the run up to election day. When you go to visit your polling station, the people that run polling stations are legally obliged to take steps to anticipate the needs of disabled people in particular. So they will have already thought a lot about how to make the polling station as accessible as possible for people with different disabilities. But, as anyone who's voted in the past will know, polling stations can be in any kind of building or not even a building. I've seen one out the boot of a car. they can vary drastically. So what's possible will vary as well. So if you're unsure about how accessible your polling station is going to be, contact the council and they'll tell you. So if you want to know, is there a ramp or are there steps, they can tell you. Is there an induction loop inside the building so that you can hear what the staff are saying? You can ask them, they'll tell you, that kind of thing. But again, as I said before, once you're in the polling station, if you still need additional support that you realise then and there, you can ask the staff and they will do their best to help you. It's also worth adding, finally, that you are now allowed to take what's known as a companion with you into the polling station if you have a disability that would make it hard for you to vote without that help. Your companion just needs to be over 18. That's all. They're simply there to help you cast your vote. They can even enter the polling booth with you if you need that help. All they'll be asked to do is fill in a little form just for recording purposes so that they know that that's what they're there for. So that all that support's available.
Great, that's great news. We have another question actually in the Q&A about linking identity fraud to the kind of public register. And I know when I was registering to vote, I like opted out of the public register. And I was asking, this could be a way of starting a conversation about checking if and how people are listed, and whether or not people are aware that they can opt out. So that's something that we've been doing recently and saying, you know, nobody can see or access this. It's just sort of for recording purposes. Yeah, so I was just wondering if you kind of speak on that public register.
Yeah, certainly. So, I mean, this is, you know, I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about the open and closed registers, as we call them. So that's a, you know, it's a really valid question that we get quite a lot, and I'll do my best to answer. So the open register, as the name suggests, is open. What that means is that register can be provided to certain entities for various purposes, and the law sets out who can, who can't. And so that can be purchased and that can be used for various things. The closed register, if you choose to be on the closed register, your details are not on that. So so that means that, you know, you're not, your details aren't shared there. There's a third option, however, and I'm not sure whether this will be of relevance to many people on the call, but the third option is known as anonymous registration. So this is specifically for people who feel that their safety or the safety of their family members would be put at risk by them being on the regular register. They can choose to register anonymously. So domestic violence survivors are kind of the most common example of that, although people in the Secret Services will register anonymously too. And what that means is that you are on the register only as with a unique identifying number. That's a mixture of letters and numbers, actually. There's no name on there, and that option is available to people, like I say, who feel their safety or their family's safety would be at risk if they're on the register. So that's the kind of third option. Although you do have to, as I say, that has to be the kind of the reason for it.
Great, that's super helpful because I know we work with people who've experienced domestic violence before, right. So that's great information.
Yeah, it's really not widely understood that option exists. So, you know, please, if that's going to be of relevance and help to you, you know, do look into it. Great,
Olivia, do you want to pop in here?
Yeah, I had a question for Stephen. I'm just gonna use panelist privilege and jump in. Stephen, we often get asked who to vote for. Now, obviously, we can't give people that answer. It's up to everyone how they choose to vote. I think a lot of people wouldn't even know what the parties stand for, where to find out information about them. So where would you say people can go to get bias-free information about the different political parties and then be able to make their decision on how to vote?
Yes, yeah, that is a common question. And the short answer is it's the information is available, but it's tricky and it's not necessarily all in the same place. So the first thing to say is that when you enter your postcode into our website, so the link I've shared a couple of times, not only will it give you the contact information for your council, but it will also give you a list of the candidates that are standing in your area. So that gives you their name and their political party, so you can start to look into them too. And what we do within that on that page on the website is we link out to a website called whocanivotefor.co.uk. Now that website will give you some of that information about what candidates, who the candidates are and what they stand for. There's no legal requirement for parties to publish, really governing what they can kind of publish about themselves and their policies and their priorities. So you may find that you get different amounts of information on different candidates, but that is somewhere you can find information. The other thing is you'll see you'll get flyers through the letterbox. You'll see posters up and that kind of thing, so you can get information there too.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's useful to know that information is out there online. I was just speaking to a member of family the other day, and they were like, well, who does what and who have we currently got in government? And it's just where do people find that information? And sometimes people just don't even know, like the government website exists, for example, where you can find out information about voting and such. And I think something that I often recommend to people is looking at some bias-free social media accounts. There's one called Simple Politics, which I always recommend to people. It sort of outlines the different political parties' manifestos in a really simple, easy to access manner, and they'll often do posts around what does each party think about this particular topic, and do informative posts like that. So I would say there is information out there. It's just finding something that's accessible to you. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, Simple Politics do a great job of sort of breaking things down and making them accessible. Something else that can be useful is, it's always important to scrutinize what you're reading, and that's true of election manifestos like it is everywhere else. And Full Fact, for example, are an organization that will fact check manifesto pledges and claims that parties are making in their campaigns, and they will look at all the parties and they will pick them apart if there's things to pick apart. So they're another one that you can go to and trust that they're doing that impartially, and it just help you understand and like I say, scrutinize what you're reading and sort of check it and make sure that it's actually accurate.
I'd say also, just for more just as a statement for anyone watching who doesn't know, but you can actually check how an MP has voted since they've been a member of Parliament, which is always quite interesting, and that gives you a really good overview of how that MP feels about particular topics, as they may have always sort of voted in favour of one thing and always against another. So I'd say for your local area as well, even just out of pure curiosity, it's worth having a look and seeing how the MPs voted in the past.
Yeah, and also we're working on getting MPs in areas to sign a pledge for Gypsy, Roma and Traveller people so that they, actively pledge to engage the communities and also to kind of tackle discrimination against the communities. And if you want us to reach out to your parliamentary candidates, you can email us with your area or your electoral area. And we will do that for you, and then we'll publish kind of everyone who signs on the website. So at least then you have an idea of, if you're in a certain area, what candidates are sort of working for the communities. But yeah, so that's something that we're doing, which hopefully will kind of help people to make a decision about who's working on behalf of the communities and who is kind of committed to fighting discrimination. So that's another thing that we can do for you, if you want.
I just thought of one other thing, which is hustings. So hustings are events where a range of candidates will come together and they will take questions from voters on their policies and priorities. So if there's hustings in your local area, you can go along and ask questions. Ask them what they want to do, what they think is important, that needs changing in their area. So do go along if you get the opportunity.
Great. Olivia, do you have any other questions or anything that you want to say before we kind of begin to wrap up?
Yeah, I don't think I have any other questions. I'll stop grilling Stephen. But in terms of just anything that I would say before we wrap up is just really don't underestimate how powerful your voice is, as a member of any community. you know, you have a right to have a say in how the country is run, and really just do your research. It never hurts to be informed about what's going on. And like I say, if for no other reason, it'll help your credit score if you register to vote. So so definitely do that. But yeah, I'd just say, you know, don't accept sort of the stock answer that people might give you of, oh, it doesn't really affect us and there's no point, you know, it doesn't really count for anything, or it's all corrupt, and those sort of things that you might have said to you. It's so quick and easy to register to vote. Do a little bit of research on the party that you'd like to vote for, and go along and get your vote in, because it does just count and it does matter.
Can I just come in on that? I think that's absolutely right. I'm just going to pop our phone number in because I realise I've talked about the website a lot, but for a lot of people, they'd rather speak to a human being. So we do have a helpline, a free phone number. So, you know, if you have a question about registering to vote, really it's sort of that kind of the principle of how these things work, how to register to vote, how to apply for free voter ID if you need it, give us a call. If it's a question about actually supporting you to complete the application, or what support will be available at the polling station, that's the question for your local electoral services team. And again, you know, you just enter your postcode into the page on our website that I linked to earlier. Just thinking as well about the registering to vote, it does indeed help your credit score, because it obviously helps to verify your address, but it also helps for things like getting like a residence parking permit, or getting places for your kids in school. So there's lots of other benefits beyond getting to have your say at the election. So there's all sorts of reasons to do it, even if you then decide not to vote on the 4th.
Yes, we would very much encourage people to vote, though. Charlie, do you have anything you want to kind of close up saying before we kind of finish for this afternoon or today, whatever time it is?
Yeah, I suppose I'll just say, you know, taking part in democracy and electing your leaders, no matter, it does very much affect your life, even if you think it doesn't. And even with travellers, gypsies being quite isolationist, it will affect your life, because, you know, the people that own the pubs are not travellers and gypsies. The people who decide where the sites are not travellers and gypsies. The people who give permission to live on your own land are not travellers and gypsies. So if you come into contact with people that are not travellers and gypsies, then therefore you're not completely isolated. Like you can't have both. You can't try and be isolated, but then also venture out. Do you know what I'm saying? So if you do venture out, then you have to be aware that there are different things that will affect your life. So then you must use the proper or go through the proper channels to make sure they affect your life for the better as opposed to the worse.
Great. I'm gonna hold on for 2 more seconds and see if anybody else has any questions. But if anyone has any questions about anything here, we're going to be popping this up on all of our social medias and kind of clipping kind of big bits out so that people can get information that they need. But yeah, thank you so much for everyone for kind of joining us for today. We got it done nice and quick, which is nice. And yeah, and thanks so much, Stephen, for coming along, kind of giving that presentation. It was really helpful.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks very much for having me. And yes, please do register to vote and get out there and have your say on the 4th.
Yeah, great. Good finish, guys.